Car sharing in Turo is an excellent way to make extra money, and it's a great way to go about starting a business or a side hustle that can potentially be scaled up to 6 or 7 figures per year. The problem, though, is that over the last 6 months, there's been a lot of changes to the job market, the economy, the car market, and more. And as a result, we have to ask the question of, is Turo still worth it? Is Turo worth pursuing in 2023? And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this video. Now, I've been doing this series since I started doing YouTube, and once per year, I break down my thoughts on Turo and car sharing for the next year. So for example, in 2021, I did a Is Turo Worth It in 2022 video. In 2020, I made one for 2021, and today, as I sit here in November of 2022, I want to do the exact same thing, but break down my thoughts and my outlook on Turo and car sharing for 2023. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a car sharing host that has cars listed on Turo, GetAround, Outdoorsy, and RV Share. Currently, I have over 3,000 trips on Turo alone. I have 18 cars listed on Turo, 1 car listed on GetAround, and I have 2 RVs listed on RV Share and Outdoorsy. This video, we're really going to be taking a broad overlook view of car sharing as a whole, and we're not going to be going into the nitty-gritty of the operations of running a car sharing business. If you're interested in learning more about that, then I definitely would encourage you to check out some of my other videos. I will link a playlist down in the description below. And I gathered this information and this perspective from not only being a car sharing host that's actively growing and operating a fleet as we speak, but also from the hundreds of different hosts that I talk to on a daily and weekly basis, both here on YouTube and on social media, but also through the Car Sharing Masterclass, which is my course that teaches you how to start and scale a car sharing business. So let's first answer the general question of, is Turo and car sharing still worth it in 2023? And I think the answer is yes, absolutely. And this is something that I'm not just preaching, I'm also practicing what I preach as well. I'm actively growing my Turo fleet. This year alone, I've purchased 9 additional cars, and I absolutely would not be doing that if I didn't feel like Turo was still a worthwhile investment. And honestly, in today's day and age where it seems like everything is crashing, everything is going down in value, I would honestly make the argument that I still think that Turo and car sharing is one of the best investments out there, especially if you have time to manage a fleet. But just because I think that Turo is still a worthwhile investment for 2023 doesn't mean that I think that you should just go in blindly. And I do think that you should have some strategy if you're somebody who's wanting to either grow, scale, or start a Turo fleet. And I think that 2023 will have some more unique challenges, and you'll probably have to start this side hustle a bit more strategically than you would have, say, in 2022. First and foremost is the issue of saturation, and I hear people talk about this on a near daily basis. Depending on who you ask, you will get a totally different answer, but the question of, is Turo oversaturated, is asked very consistently, and it's a very valid concern for many Turo hosts that are either wanting to start Turo or scale their Turo fleets. Now, I have analyzed hundreds of different Turo markets, different cities, different states throughout the entire country, and the consensus that I have come to with this analysis is that Turo as a whole is not oversaturated. There is plenty of room for more hosts to join the platform and still be very successful doing it. But I do think that there are certain markets and certain vehicle types that are oversaturated. And if you're somebody that's wanting to start or grow a Turo fleet, you should be very aware of if your market is oversaturated or if the car that you're wanting to buy is oversaturated. What I mean by this is that depending on where you go in the United States, those different cities and different markets are going to have different needs. And as a result, some cars will do better than others. But over the years, certain types of vehicles have become very popular on the Turo platform. And as a result, these vehicles have become oversaturated, and there's simply too many of them listed out on Turo. I think a perfect example of this is a Tesla Model 3. I am a firm believer that Teslas are oversaturated on Turo, and if you go onto Turo today and you list a Tesla as a brand new host, there is a very good chance that you will lose money doing that. Additionally, oversaturation is very dependent on individual markets. For example, a Tesla Model 3 is very oversaturated in Denver, but a Tesla Model 3 isn't as saturated in, say, Milwaukee. Additionally, oversaturation can apply to entire vehicle segments. For example, I believe that the Houston, Texas market is oversaturated in luxury cars. And so because of that, if you wanted to rent out a luxury car on Turo in this city, you might end up having a tough time. But alternatively, Houston really needs some mid-tier and low-end economy cars, so you could do very well in that segment. The point is that as Turo has become more and more hosts have joined the platform, and they've listed a variety of different vehicles. And because of this, certain vehicles are oversaturated while others aren't. It also is important to note that some markets are still very immature when it comes to Turo, and you can, for the most part, list any vehicle you want and do relatively well. But the important part is to understand which market applies to you and which vehicles will and won't perform well. I have dozens of videos covering this. Again, I'll link those down in the description below so that you can learn how to analyze your market and determine which cars will perform best. Another important thing that I want to talk about is the cyclicalness of Turo. Turo is absolutely cyclical, and I think that this realization is going to smack a lot of Turo hosts in the face that have recently joined Turo in the last year. I joined Turo in 2017, which feels like forever ago, but this was truly the glory days whenever it came to Turo. Back in the day, you had hosts that were making an absolute killing because Turo basically allowed for their hosts to make their own rules. Now, don't get me wrong, you still had to follow the terms of service, and there were a clear set of guidelines that you had to follow as a host. But as far as the amount of fees that you could charge, the pricing structure, it was all a lot more lenient back in 2017 than it is today. But of course, Turo as a company decided that they wanted to have longevity, they wanted to be here long term, and as a result, they had to change their rules in order to be more sustainable. And because of this, they started implementing more and more strict guidelines that hosts had to follow. These were things like implementing caps to how much you can charge for mileage, making the late fee structure different, making it so that you can and can't charge for certain things. There was a ton of changes that ended up happening to Turo in around 2018. And of course, Turo hosts were pretty upset about it, and this dynamic between Turo and Turo hosts ended up declining throughout 2018 and 2019. In fact, I remember during this period of time, you would go onto the Turo Facebook groups and you would see dozens of different posts from some very large hosts talking about how they wanted to leave the platform, how they were selling their fleets, how Turo was just no longer worth it. But then the pandemic hit, travel was limited, rental car shortages struck the United States and the entire world, and as a result, Turo and car sharing absolutely exploded. More and more hosts started joining the platform. Content creators like me who create content around Turo started gaining more and more traction, and people who were interested in renting on Turo became more and more aware of the platform, thus driving more and more business. But I do think that it would be a bit naive to think that this boom will continue forever, because the reality is it probably won't. As the economy shifts, as people lose their jobs, and as economic outlook continues to look worse and worse, people are going to be less likely to rent from Turo, and that's just the unfortunate reality of a recession. And like I've said in about a dozen different videos, I think that this recession is going to affect people and hosts drastically differently. Hosts that are located in tourist destinations that accommodate to people who are going on vacation and spending money for their own enjoyment are going to be much more impacted than a host that's accommodating to a worker that needs to commute to and from work, or to a mom that needs to pick up her kids from school. There are certain types of situations where renting a car from Turo may be unavoidable, and these are the types of hosts that I think will fare really well during a recession. Whereas the hosts that would be categorized as more frivolous types experiences, I think these are going to be the ones that are more heavily impacted. But I do think that this oncoming recession is going to have a major silver lining, and that is that hosts will inevitably leave the Turo platform. And this could be for a few different reasons. One is a slowdown in the economy. As people are traveling less, Turo demand will fall in some markets, making Turo no longer worth it or profitable for some hosts, thus making them leave the platform as a whole. Another factor could be job loss. Casual hosts who are just using Turo as a side hustle or as a way to justify their new car purchase may lose their job and may be forced to pivot directions, sacrificing Turo in the process. And third, and I think a real likely scenario, is the car market causing some major issues for some hosts that have spread themselves too thin. I've talked about this throughout this entire year, but over the last year and a half, many people have been spending too much money on buying a used or a new car, paying above MSRP, above actual cash values for these vehicles. And now, as we sit here today, and the car market has fallen 10%, and it's expected to fall more and more for the rest of 2022 and 2023, what happens to these people that are now underwater on their car, but have that car listed out on Turo? Well, the first scenario is a host that has purchased and overpaid for multiple vehicles. And as the Turo market shifts and declines, they're going to be put in a position to where they're either A, going to have to accept the fact that they may end up losing money on each and every rental that their car is going out on, or option two, they're going to be forced to sell that car and sell it for a loss, thus leading to more issues down the road. And another scenario that I think is extremely likely are these Turo hosts that have overpaid for their cars. Their cars are out on a rental, they get totaled, Turo pays the actual cash value, which is significantly less than what they paid for the car, and now this Turo host is underwater on the vehicle, they didn't get paid enough to pay off the loan in full, and they are now screwed out of thousands of dollars, and they've been left with a really bad taste in their mouth, and they're going to leave the Turo platform altogether. I personally believe that this is going to end up happening to a lot of hosts. The point is that I believe that overpaying for cars over the last year and a half is setting a lot of hosts up to fail. And I think that as a result of this failure, a lot of hosts are going to end up leaving Turo, which is good news for the hosts that are actually here for the long haul. The hosts that want to scale and grow a Turo fleet, want to be here for years and years in the future. And as these Turo hosts leave, there's going to be more and more business for you. A very similar situation started to play out at the very beginning of the pandemic. And you had these people leaving Turo because they were very nervous about what was going on in the economy and around the entire world. And ultimately, the hosts that stuck it out and stayed with Turo ended up getting paid big in the end. And I predict that this exact same thing will be happening in a different way this year. In conclusion, I think that Turo is absolutely worth pursuing in 2023, and I think that you can still make a ton of money with Turo in the new year. I do think that you need to be a little bit more strategic with what types of cars you buy and the segment of vehicles you're going after, and I do encourage you to be patient because I do think that there's a good chance that things could go up and down in 2023 with economic conditions, and unfortunately, a lot of this is unavoidable and it's completely out of your control. But if you buy your car strategically, if you run your operation smoothly, and if you pay attention to your profit, you should end up exiting the recession perfectly fine and stronger than you were before. I know that I have big plans for my Turo fleet in 2023. We're looking to get a commercial space. We're continuing to grow our fleet. We're hiring our first employee. So I absolutely will be continuing Turo through 2023 and beyond because it is absolutely worth doing. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I'll see you guys in the next video.